All right, everybody, welcome back into Cherry Picking. Today's video, must add for Week 18 of the fantasy hockey season, is always presented by FanDuel Canada, North America's #1 sportsbook. Pretty interesting week this week, obviously, with the Super Bowl coming up, but a couple teams are playing 4 games: the Canadiens, the Senators, the Lightning, and Utah. And then 4 teams are playing 2 games this week as well. So those players won't be as useful with less volume: the Ducks, the Sabres, the Red Wings, and the Jets. As I mentioned, weird week with the Super Bowl coming up. Just 1 game on Monday, 2 games on Sunday, and then 14 games on Tuesday and Saturday on each of those days. So we got 5 players to pick up. Let's get into it. All right, so the first pickup we have is Josh Norris on the Ottawa Senators. 32% rostered, playing that center position on the second line for the Sens as well. 18 goals on the year through almost 50 games played, with only 4 teams playing 4 games for this upcoming week, and a lot of people using the streamer center strategy. I think Norris is a great pickup and probably the best center you can pick up that is going to be pretty available, I would assume, at 32% rostered. If he isn't, and you want someone on the Sens as well, because they have that 4-game capability, Pinto is also an option. I've talked about him enough on this show, though, so I don't need to bring him up again. But as I mentioned, Norris playing on that second line with Drake Batherson and David Perron. Now that he's back, he's also playing on that second power play. He had a huge game against the Capitals in their most recent game with a goal and 3 points after going pointless in 4 games. So hopefully this kind of gets him going for the week where the Sens play 4 games and they play Nashville, Tampa twice, and then Florida. They have that kind of double stop in Tampa and then playing the Panthers as well. So some good opportunities there. Tough defensive teams in Nashville and Florida, but Tampa Bay definitely have struggled defensively, at least at 5-on-5. So Josh Norris, I think this week with his volume, the best available streaming center. All right, so the next guy we're going to be picking up is Alex Laferriere on the LA Kings. 19% rostered in Yahoo Fantasy Hockey Leagues right now, playing that right wing spot. Now on a line with Kevin Fiala and Quinton Byfield, and they've just got put together, after Laferriere has come back from injury. Obviously a small sample size, but he is playing really well right now on that line, and that line as a whole is playing well. And expected goals for percentage from that line is 74%. Laferriere had a really hot start to the season. Started on that top line actually with Kopitar and Kempe. Now you see Alex Turcotte there. Talked about him last week in Must Add if you haven't seen that video. But hot start to the season for Laferriere. Had 13 goals in the first 30 games or so, I want to say. Then got hurt or went into a little slump, got hurt. And since being back, has started playing a lot better. Since January 24th, so about a week ago now, he's 6th in the NHL in total offense created at 5-on-5. Right up there with guys like Brandon Hagel, Adrian Kempe, obviously one of his teammates, and then Connor Bedard over the past week. He has 2 points in his last 4 games, but the biggest thing about Laferriere, if you've watched these games that the Kings have played, he's had 2 goals called back. One from offside, and then another one from a bullshit goaltender interference call. I think it was against Detroit, might have been against Florida, but still. Very unlucky. I think the bounces are going to start going his way, especially that he's playing on that really solid second line with Byfield and Fiala, and is also getting opportunities on that first power play again, which is great. One thing to note too, pretty solid in bangers leagues because he does generate a decent amount of hits, has 80 hits so far on the year through about halfway through the season. So Laferriere, definitely one of my favorite pickups this week at 19% roster. All right, it's time to talk about Tony DeAngelo, the newest member of the New York Islanders. Actually, I don't think newest. I think Scott Peronovich would actually carry that title at this point after just getting traded there from St. Louis. But DeAngelo, one of the newer members on the New York Islanders, 15% roster in Yahoo Fantasy Hockey Leagues, coming over from the KHL. Obviously, if you're familiar with DeAngelo, played in the NHL for a number of years with the Flyers, the Rangers, the Hurricanes as well, and then kind of got, I don't know why he didn't get signed to a contract this offseason. He has, off-ice issues. He's a little opinionated, but I don't think that would really take away because he's been used as a great asset in the KHL and now for the Islanders as well. And he's proven that he's fantasy viable. He played 28 minutes against the Flyers on Thursday night in a game that they won 3-0 as well. And he's played 25 and 22 minutes in the other 2 games he's played for the Islanders so far. I know his points don't really show it yet, but he's an offensive tool. And especially with Dobson out, that's how Patrick Roy is going to use him. He's playing on the first pair, playing on the first power play, starts most of his shifts in the offensive zone. He has 30 offensive zone faceoffs under his belt since joining the Isles just 3 games ago. Also, his plus-minus is +3 right now, being on for 4 goals and against for 2. Just seeing the way Patrick Roy has used him and how much ice time he's getting, it's different from years past. Like, if you saw how he was used on Carolina, let's say last year, or even in similar situations over the past couple of years, he hasn't really been trusted at 5-on-5. He's only been used as an offensive tool and a power play tool. But I think that's changing. He's played fantastic since joining this Islanders team. He's contributed in the offensive end while Patrick Roy continues to put him in those offensive situations, but he's also holding his own, proving that he can play a ton of minutes, like 28 minutes, in a game where the Islanders were leading. It was tied for a good chunk of the game, but leading for a majority of the game. So Patrick Roy clearly trusts him. He's going to continue to get these minutes, and he's just going to continue to probably get assists and even start scoring here now that he's on the first power play. All right, the next guy we're going to be looking at is Barrett Hayton on the Utah Hockey Club, playing that center position on the second line. 12% rostered through 50 games so far this year, just 12 goals, 14 assists. Had a pretty good start to the year, went through a little bit of a lull. We've seen him pick it up a little bit more recently, but I think he's a really great streamer at center this week if you need him. Less than 15% rostered, so more available than what Josh Norris would be, or Shane Pinto probably at this point too, but he'd be in a similar range. But Utah has a few more favorable matchups, I would say. They play the Flyers, Columbus, Carolina, and Washington next week. Those first two are definitely attainable not attainable, but just someone that you could use Barrett Hayton for those certain days as a streamer. He has 4 goals and 2 assists in his last 5 games played as well. Those points coming in bunches. He's playing on the second line, as I mentioned right now, with Alex Kerfoot and Josh Doan, giving him the ability to really drive the offense on that line as well, considering the styles of the other two players and where he was kind of playing earlier in the season as well. He has the second highest amount of offense created while on the ice for Utah over his last week, and if that makes sense, if not, to put it more simply, when he's been on the ice for the last 4 games, or when he's been on the ice for the last 4, over the last course of the last 4 games, Utah has created a lot of offense and good offense. Much better offense than when he is not on the ice. So I think he's found a good spot on this line, and hopefully it translates to some points this week, considering he has 4 games. So I think he's a really solid streamer. All right, the last guy we're going to be picking up, another defenseman, Jared Spurgeon on the Minnesota Wild. 11% rostered. I think this number is crazy low, but it kind of makes sense, obviously, considering his injury history of the last couple of years and just the role he's played on this Wild team. But right now, it seems like he's really being used as an offensive defenseman. And if it's not clear to you, let me paint you this picture, and I'll paint it for you a lot better to show that he is. If you look at his last week or so, he's started more faceoffs in the offensive zone than anyone else on the team that's a defenseman. 33 offensive zone faceoffs. That's the same amount as guys like Lane Hutson, Rasmus Anderson, more than Montour, Jacob Chikrin, and Shea Theodore over that same span. Those guys are all considered very solid offensive defensemen. He's also started more shifts in the offensive zone than any other D-man on his team over the past week, 11, which is, again, more than guys like John Carlson and Lane Hutson. So he's playing that role now for Minnesota. Like, it's certainly not Brock Faber. I want to say, like, Kalen Addison is probably the closest guy who's been used as an offensive defenseman for the Wild over the past, 2 or 3 seasons. But Spurgeon can also do everything else on the ice. So if he's being used in offensive situations, his ice times just can continue to increase at this point. He's playing 20-plus minutes per night. He has 2 goals and 4 points in his last 4 games as well. So it's being put to the test, and he's converting and producing. And he's also 6th in total offense created over the past week amongst defensemen. This is an easy pickup, no-brainer for me. My favorite pickup of the week if you need a defense. All right, thank you guys for tuning in. Let me know what you thought of must-add for Week 18 of the fantasy hockey season. Shout out to FanDuel Canada for sponsoring the video. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next week.